Hey Tris, so I heard you got in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, the final game just a few days ago, and apparently you've been playing quite a bit of it, is that right?
Yep, and quite a bit more than the demo.
Yeah, well that's good to hear, because I believe we can cover everything up until the end of Chapter 2, whereas the demo ended at Chapter 1, is that correct? Or ended at the end of Chapter 1?
Yep, so we get a whole new chapter to discuss.
Alright, and how much more gameplay does that represent? Like, is it significantly longer than Chapter 1, or is it roughly the same length? Just give us like a quick overall idea.
It's definitely significantly longer. For comparison's sake, Chapter 1 was 2 story levels and 3 like side quest challenge levels. Whereas Chapter 2 is 5 story levels and a good 5 to 10 challenge side quest levels that open up as you go. So there's a lot more to it.
That sounds pretty considerable, and the demo is already pretty meaty, so it sounds like the game's already picking up, despite seemingly already starting off with a fairly lengthy amount of content. So, I guess, can you give us like a broad overview of what exactly happens over the course of that demo, or over the course of the second chapter, to the extent that you can discuss?
Sure. So Chapter 2 focuses on recruiting all 4 champions. So you go visit Mipha, you go visit Daruk, you go visit Rivali, you go visit Urbosa, you go to those different areas. So you go to Zora's Domain, Death Mountain, the Tabantha region around Rito Village, and Gerudo Desert.
Nice. And do you get play as all 4 of them?
You do. So you play as Mipha and Daruk and Urbosa during their chapter, and then for Rivali you get him after. So you can use them for a bunch of side missions and other things, but yeah.
And how are they?
They're really fun. Going into Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity from the demo initially, I had a lot of fun with Impa. Impa was my favorite character to play as so far. Now that's not necessarily the case. It's definitely a toss-up right now between, I want to say between Mipha and Rivali. Okay. They were both, and those are the 2 champions that we hadn't really gotten much gameplay of beforehand. I know many people were worried that Mipha would basically just play like Rudo from the original Hyrule Warriors, who has a really frustrating moveset for most people. But she's actually really fun, and they incorporated her special champion healing ability into her special attack, which will actually heal her a couple hearts when she uses it. And it's really nice, kind of charging through the battlefield with the really quick-paced trident that she wields. And then Rivali has an entirely different moveset based on if he's standing on the ground or if he's flying in the air.
That's wild. Does any other character have that big of a change?
Not from what I've experienced.
So how's a flight work with Rivali? Can you just choose to fly, or did you activate a move to...
So every character has a unique action with the ZR button. So,
Okay.
like, for Link, it's using arrows. For Urbosa, it's charging the lightning, as we saw back at the Treehouse Live demo. For Rivali, his is to fly, and that completely changes his movement speed and attack options. And if you actually pull up his list of attacks, there's 2 separate sections based on if he's standing or in the air. And it's actually really crazy.
Yeah, that sounds crazy. That's super cool. So, do you prefer to fight while in the air or on the ground as Rivali?
It actually really depends on what you're fighting, because while he's a lot slower on the ground, some of his moves on the ground are a lot better for taking on larger enemies. Whereas when he's flying in the air, he can just like blow through crowds really quickly.
Okay, very cool. And how about Daruk? What do you think of him?
So Daruk is actually really nice too, because what we saw back around Tokyo Game Show made everyone concerned that he was really slow. But surprisingly for a Goron, he's actually really fast, and a lot better than Darunia from the original Hyrule Warriors. He has a lot of movement options, and he has a lot of like combo potential with his attacks, because he's based around creating these kind of magma blocks and then making them explode.
You say surprisingly for a Goron, but have you forgotten about the Goron races in Majora's Mask, Tris?
That is true, but even when he isn't rolling, he's fast, and that's what's scary.
Are you able to roll, though, in this game?
Yeah, so the rolling is his main like dash attack, and what's actually really fun is as he's dashing around, if you press the strong attack button, he'll just kind of do a slam in the ground while he keeps going. So you can just mow through enemies as you keep rolling. It's pretty fun.
Oh, that sounds fun. I'm all about that. In Majora's Mask, the Goron power, the Goron mask is one of my favorites. So Daruk might be more my style. Now, during the course of this chapter, you also come across two divine beasts, right? Or at least a couple levels involve the divine beasts. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works in this game?
Yeah, so you come across specifically divine beasts Varuda and Varudania. Basically, each of these story chapters, it's focusing on recruiting the champions as the pilots for the divine beasts, and then they get to pilot the divine beasts afterwards. Both of them play relatively the same in terms of how the level is structured, so they're definitely different than the normal format. This isn't like playing as a giant boss in the original Hyrule Warriors.
To be clear, are you saying you're playing as the divine beast?
Yes.
Holy
As
crap.
it's pretty cool. Like, it's not just, I mean, technically you're playing as the character piloting the divine beast, but you don't control the character, you control the divine beast. So
Got it.
What's really fun about it though is it reminds me a lot of like classic arcade like shooters where they're like on the rails and you have to point and shoot at different things and react appropriately.
Right. So what are you targeting in this case? Because I feel like you would just be towering over every common enemy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so you're targeting like clusters of like 1,000 enemies. So while normal Hyrule Warriors, it's a feat to beat 500, then 900, then 1,200 enemies. Some of these levels feel like they want you to target like 4,000 enemies, and over the course of a couple of minutes. And with how destructive these divine beasts are, it's not too hard.
Wow. So is this more of a break in the action, or is it actually like, can it be challenging? Or I feel like when I picture in my mind, I'm like, this is gonna be you're just gonna steamroll these guys. Like there can't be any challenge at all in this. This giant, mythical beast thing. So yeah, like, how does it actually feel?
So I actually found it surprisingly challenging. Now I'm also playing on like the hardest difficulty as I go because I want to see what kind of challenge the game presents. I've almost died in both of the divine beast levels. But most of my hearts ended up almost going away, and it's because there's a lot of, for example, Varudania has a counter to it, and the point of it is it kind of picks up one of its arms, and it grabs incoming projectile and tosses it back. But if you don't time that right, or hold it beforehand, you can miss it, and then it'll just end up hitting you. And then Varuda has a sort of shield that can be put up to protect against incoming projectiles or enemy attacks, but you can't attack at the same time. And some of these levels are filled with the larger like mini boss style enemies like Lionels and Taluses, so they're like tossing some pretty hefty attacks at you.
That's interesting. Wow. So how does it actually feel to pilot these things? Like, are they just big and lumbering, or are they surprisingly agile for what they are?
They're definitely not agile. It's not like normal warrior maps where you have this big open space and you're wandering around the whole thing. Like I mentioned, it's more like an on-the-rails shooter kind of thing.
Right.
At least for the two that I've experienced. It's a set path for the most part. You can kind of control it, but it's very clunky to control the exact movement, so you're best off just kind of choosing when to move forward or not, rather than trying to go back. They get two attacks, so there's an attack that has to kind of charge up to be used, which is significantly more powerful, or basically just a standard shooter attack. Like Varuda shoots like little beams of ice if you just spam the R button, and you can just keep using motion controls to target at enemies and just keep firing away.
So that sounds pretty different to the standard Warriors type of gameplay. Does it mesh in pretty well here, or does it kind of stand out for feeling so different?
It definitely is different. I wouldn't say that in a bad way, though. It's definitely a nice way to kind of break up the pacing, and it feels appropriate for the story that Age of Calamity wants to tell. It feels appropriate that you get to play these divine beasts, and I think if they just played like giant characters, I would almost be disappointed. Because I feel like that would just mean instead of doing something unique with them, they just made them into big characters. But they made a whole unique experience for the divine beasts that make it feel like it's actually the characters piloting them and controlling them. And I think that makes it far more interesting.
That's pretty cool. How are the cutscenes continuing into Chapter 2? I know we can't discuss some specifically, but in a general sense, like, do they maintain the energy of what we saw in the demo, which seemed to be fantastic based on what I saw? And is there anything that's kind of like surprised you about them?
So I definitely think the cutscenes and the quality of these cutscenes are better than a lot of the ones we got from Breath of the Wild. I'm really enjoying these and the content they have within them, and I think a lot of the voice direction feels really solid too.
Yeah, so do all the characters seem to retain their Breath of the Wild voice actors from what you can tell, or do they sound, how are their performances compared to what we've seen of them?
From what I can tell, they all seem to be the same. They all sound the same, at least.
Okay.
So if they're not the same people, they got people that can put on the same kind of voices. One that stands out in particular to me is Mipha. A lot of people were very mixed on Mipha's voice in Breath of the Wild. They felt that her inflections were a bit odd. But now, it almost sounds like the actress is more comfortable with the character now, and it sounds a lot more natural for Mipha speaking, which is really nice. A bit strange when you look at it in the context of 100 years ago she was better at speaking, but that's...
Yeah, well, there's also the fact that Link was a complete badass 100 years ago and a total weakling in the modern day, so...
And then, obviously, because all the cutscenes are fully voiced, that means other additional characters get voices. So for example, when you get to meet Mipha, you actually get to hear King Dorephan's voice, which is actually really nice. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of his voice because he sounds really quiet. That's one thing that really stood out to me. It almost sounds like to the point where his audio wasn't balanced properly. That's how quiet he sounds at times, and it's a little odd. But beyond that, his delivery is pretty good, and I do like the fact that we're getting more voices for a bunch of these characters. It makes the world feel a lot better.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. Now, speaking of a lot better, one thing I have to ask you about is the performance any better than what we saw in the demo? Because we saw some significant slowdown, regardless of how you play, but especially when you're playing in two-player mode in the demo. So has that improved at all from what you've noticed?
So, I can't speak for two-player mode because I haven't had a chance to properly experience that yet. But in terms of other slowdowns, the main place I notice slowdowns really is the Divine Beast levels. Those definitely slow down at times, which did feel a little disappointing at times, but it's hard to tell if it's because of firing too many projectiles at once or way too many enemies loaded on screen at the same time, or, both. It definitely was noticeable it was most noticeable for the Divine Beast levels. There were a couple times otherwise where I noticed a few slowdowns, namely still in that Hyrule Field level where there's just... I really think that's because of a mix of all the enemies and all the grass that you can cut.
Let's just hope there's not a Lost Woods level, otherwise things could get real ugly.
I definitely think that most of the game seems to, or at least from my experience through Chapter 2, most of it seems better than that first level in Hyrule. You'll notice a slowdown every now and then. I noticed Urbosa's special attack slows things down a little bit with all the lightning that she's summoning, but it's not too bad, especially since that's during a special animation you can't control anyway, so...
And there is something interesting about Hyrule Warriors where it almost, this isn't a defense, but it almost feels good when you get the game to slow down by that much. It's like, yes, I'm just wrecking these enemies, and the game can't even handle how much I'm destroying everything.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm not someone who's usually too bothered by performance, so the slowdowns, while at times noticeable, it's never impacted my ability to enjoy the game. I never felt like, oh no, like the slowdowns are eating my inputs or anything like that.
Right, Hyrule Warriors seems to be, or Warriors in general seems to be one of those games that's kind of resistant to it impacting the gameplay.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit, well, speaking of the gameplay, can you tell us a little bit more about everything else you've encountered or you've come across outside of the story missions? Like anything else that stood out to you about any of the side quests or challenge levels or anything else that people may not have picked up on or appreciated in the demo?
I really do love how much charm is put into them. So a lot of the little side missions, even ones that you don't necessarily play, but the ones where you spend materials on. There's just good writing for each one to kind of explain why you need to spend these materials and then why you get the little reward you get at the end. Impa wants to throw a party for kids in Kakariko Village, for example, to reward them for something. And then you gather those materials and you spend them, and Impa feels so happy after that, so she earns a new bonus heart. I don't know for sure if that's exactly one, but that's just an example. They put a lot of heart and charm into these, which makes it really pleasant to kind of go through. And it's a lot better than what the original Hyrule Warriors did, which was just a menu and, a skill tree.
Right, so my impression of this game so far, based purely on what I've seen, is that it just feels a lot more cohesive of an experience. Probably partially because this is as far as we know, a canon entry in the Zelda games. So does that still hold true based on your extended playtime now?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I love the fact that this game feels everything in it makes sense, and it feels like it's taking place within the world. There's rarely any menus that feel like they're menus taking you out of the experience.
Okay, great. Well, speaking of the world itself, we've already explored, we've made multiple videos comparing different segments of the world in Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
But how do the new regions feel? Like, do they still feel like they take place within that same world as we've already played in Breath of the Wild, or do they feel any different? Are there any surprises in there from what you've experienced?
So, some of the levels feel like completely one-to-one. Like, for example, Gerudo Desert and Gerudo Town, which we already did a video on just from the Treehouse Live demo, or the Treehouse Live stream from a few weeks back. That actually is still really solid and matches up really well, and it really feels like you're in the exact same place. Even if extended areas of the desert may not have exact one-to-one details, it still feels like the same area. What definitely caught my interest was the level with Rivali, the Tabantha region, and kind of surrounding Rito Village. It doesn't feel the same at all, to me at least. It feels a lot more mountainous than that area originally did. And I know that's near the Hebra Mountains, but it feels more mountainous and snowy than the Tabantha region did in Breath of the Wild. So I don't know, maybe some climate change hit in that 100 years.
Oh no, it's a cautionary tale.
There's a lot more snow around Rito Village in Age of Calamity than there is in Breath of the Wild. But maybe that's so that they don't have to make multiple levels in the same area. Who knows?
I've been saying Hyrule needs to switch from coal to clean energy, so they have... How about anything else about the game that stood out to you now that you've been able to sink way more time into it? Like, has anything else that you suspected might be the case, or maybe was hoping might be the case, ended up being the case, or anything different from your expectations? Like, how's it all kind of coming together right now, based on, again, only 2 chapters of the game so far?
It's definitely coming together better than I was initially expecting. I was kind of expecting it to take a while to really get into it and come together. Like, back, say, like a month ago, looking at everything we knew about the game, I was a little worried it would feel a bit slow to get to proper, like, story beats, and that it may take a while to really take off and grab interest. But, I mean, from even just the first level I played in Chapter 2, I was interested and invested in what was going on. In my case, that was Mifa's level. So I was invested in what was happening around Zora's Domain and found it interesting in comparison to how things were in Breath of the Wild. So it didn't take long at all to really grab my interest, which was better than I expected, which is definitely good. Because I know a bunch of people are worried because they feel this may not be a canon story. They're worried that it's just going to be kind of tossing a bunch of things in the Breath of the Wild world willy-nilly all over the place. But that really doesn't seem to be the case. It feels accurate to what one would expect from 100 years before Breath of the Wild, and it's exciting to go through, honestly.
That's exciting. That's really good to hear. I mean, that's the main thing that has me interested about this game is how does it play? How does it play into the Breath of the Wild connection? How is it expanding the story? What more are we seeing of these characters? Like, that's all stuff that excites me as one who's not a huge Warriors fan, but as one who is a Breath of the Wild fan. So yep. I'm really looking forward to seeing that myself. And I guess real quick, how are you liking the story so far? Continuing again from what we saw in the demo. I'm honestly enjoying it. I'm finding it pretty fun to go through. It's leaving me really curious to know more and really just push through as much as I can to really figure things out. So I guess that's a good sign. I can't put it down. Well, that's great to hear. So is there anything else about the game, Trist, you want us to know before we wrap it up here?
We'll be doing a video detailing this a bit more, but I do want to talk about this fun little reference I found in the last level to Chapter 2. I was just kind of exploring around looking for Koroks, and I found a graveyard. And sure, you find a graveyard in Hyrule, that's not too weird, but the exact layout of this graveyard reminded me a lot of the one in Ocarina of Time at Kakariko Village, to the point where even one of the headstones is even pushed back. They have the same kind of ramp shape to them, and they also have a little fairy icon or a little fairy design on them, just like the Ocarina of Time fairies. and it's actually like a neat little reference. And we'll do a little video on it to properly show the comparison between them. But yeah, it was actually really neat to find that, and I'm hoping to find more little references like that throughout the world.
I love that. That's such a cool little thing. I mean, yeah, because the graveyard is such a memorable location in Ocarina, as I guess most locations are, but it's always fun to see those callbacks, especially because we didn't expect it. Like, we didn't expect there to be a whole lot in the way of callbacks beyond Breath of the Wild, but we've already seen, Lon Lon Ranch, we've seen Mabe, however you say it, Village from Link's Awakening, and now we have the graveyard from Ocarina of Time. So it kind of feels like they're embracing a little bit the spirit of the original Hyrule Warriors, which is bringing in, kind of tying in all these different elements of the Zelda series. But now they're doing it in a way that's cohesive and makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that is pretty exciting to me, so... All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for informing us on exactly what you think so far and how Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity plays. If you like the discussion, make sure to click that subscribe button and ring that bell for tons more on Age of Calamity, including plenty of other videos I'm sure we have going up today, plus perhaps over the coming days. And then, of course, we'll have our review, and I imagine probably not too long as well. So, with that, thank you for watching, everyone, and of course, stay tuned for lots more on this game and everything else Nintendo as well. We'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.